My name is Sarah Thompson. I'm 32 years old, born and raised in the suburbs of Chicago. I work as a marketing manager for a mid-sized tech company, a job I landed after getting my MBA from Northwestern. My husband, well, soon-to-be ex-husband, is Mark. He's 34, a software engineer at a startup downtown. We met in college, got married right after graduation, and settled into what I thought was a perfect life in Oak Park, a leafy suburb just outside the city. We have a 5-year-old daughter, Emma, who's the light of my life. Or at least, she was the light of our lives. Now, I'm not so sure about Mark's priorities. It was a Tuesday when I found out. Just another ordinary day, or so I thought. I was at work, buried in spreadsheets and client emails, when my phone buzzed. A text from Amy, my best friend since high school. "Call me ASAP," it said. "It's about Mark." My stomach dropped. Amy works at the same company as Mark, though in a different department. We'd joked before about how she could keep an eye on him for me, but it had always been just that, a joke. I never actually thought she'd have anything to report. I stepped out of the office, my heart pounding. Amy's voice was tense when she picked up. "Sarah, I don't know how to say this," she began, and I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. "I just saw Mark in the parking garage. He was with someone. A woman. They were intimate." The words hit me like a physical blow. Intimate. Such a polite way of saying my husband had his hands all over another woman. I remember gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white, willing Amy to say it was all a mistake, a misunderstanding. But as she described what she'd seen, the passionate kiss, the way Mark's hands roamed over the woman's body, I knew it was true. I don't remember the rest of that day clearly. Somehow, I made it through my meetings, plastering on a fake smile while my mind raced. Who was she? How long had this been going on? Was our entire marriage a lie? I went home early, unable to focus on work. Our house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage set for Mark's deception. Every happy photo on the wall, every piece of furniture we'd picked out together, it all seemed to mock me. I sat on our bed, the same bed where we'd made love countless times, where we'd conceived our daughter, and I felt sick to my stomach. When Mark came home that evening, I was waiting. He walked in, all smiles, leaning in for a kiss like it was any other day. I recoiled, and that's when he knew. The smile faded from his face, replaced by a look of confusion, then dawning realization. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply told him what I knew, my voice steady even as my world crumbled around me. I watched the emotions play across his face, shock, guilt, fear. He tried to deny it at first, but I could see the truth in his eyes. When he realized I wasn't buying his lies, he switched tactics, begging for forgiveness, swearing it was a one-time mistake. But I knew better. The signs had been there for months, late nights at the office, sudden business trips, the way he guarded his phone. I'd ignored them, trusting him implicitly. Now, I felt like a fool. I told him to leave. He protested, saying we should talk about it, that we could work things out. But I was done talking, done listening to his excuses. I needed space to think, to breathe, to figure out what came next. That night, as I lay alone in our bed, sleep eluded me. My mind raced with questions, with memories suddenly tainted by doubt. Had he been thinking of her when we made love? When we celebrated our anniversary? When we took Emma to the park on Sundays? The next few days passed in a blur. I took time off work, unable to face my colleagues, dreading the pity I knew I'd see in their eyes. Mark kept calling, texting, begging for a chance to explain. I ignored him, focusing instead on taking care of Emma, shielding her as best I could from the storm raging between her parents. It was during one of those quiet moments with Emma, as I watched her play in the backyard, oblivious to how her world was about to change, that the anger really hit me. This man, who had promised to love and cherish me, had not only betrayed me, but had put our daughter's happiness at risk. The life we'd built together, the future we'd planned, he'd thrown it all away for what? A cheap thrill? A momentary escape from responsibility? That's when the idea of revenge first took root in my mind. At first, I pushed it away, telling myself I was better than that. But as the days wore on, as the pain of betrayal gave way to a simmering rage, the idea grew stronger. I started small. I changed the passwords on our joint accounts, bank, Netflix, even the grocery delivery service. Petty perhaps, but it gave me a small sense of satisfaction to imagine Mark's frustration when he couldn't access them. But it wasn't enough. I wanted him to feel the same pain, the same humiliation I was feeling. So I dug deeper. I went through his emails, his social media accounts. It wasn't hard. We'd always shared our passwords, another sign of the trust I'd foolishly given him. What I found made my blood boil. This wasn't a one-time thing, or even a recent development. There were messages going back months, snippets of conversations that left no doubt about the nature of his relationship with this woman. Her name was Olivia. She worked in HR at Mark's company. The irony wasn't lost on me. From their exchanges, I pieced together their story. It had started innocently enough, with flirtatious banter at company events. But it had quickly escalated. Weekend meetups while I thought he was working. A weekend getaway disguised as a business trip. They'd even talked about a future together, about how they'd break the news to me. Armed with this knowledge, I formulated my plan. It was risky, potentially career-ending for both of them, but in my hurt and anger, I didn't care. I compiled all the evidence, the emails, the hotel receipts, the photos they'd exchanged, and sent it all to Mark's boss and the head of HR. I knew it would cause a scandal. Affairs between employees, especially when one worked in HR, were taken seriously. But I wanted more than just professional consequences. I wanted everyone to know what kind of man Mark really was. So I took to social media. I posted a carefully worded status update, not naming names, but making it clear that my marriage was over due to infidelity. Then I tagged every mutual friend, every family member, every colleague in Mark's network. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Messages of support flooded in, along with shocked reactions and calls for more details. I watched as Mark's carefully constructed image crumbled. His friends, our friends, turned their backs on him. His family, who had always treated me like a daughter, were horrified. Even his own parents called me, apologizing for their son's behavior, assuring me that this wasn't how they'd raised him. The final blow came a week later. Mark was fired from his job. Olivia, too. In one fell swoop, I'd taken away his career, his reputation, and his mistress. I should have felt victorious. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? To make him suffer as I had suffered? But as I sat alone in our house, my house now, I felt hollow. The anger that had fueled me for weeks suddenly dissipated, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. I looked at Emma, innocently playing with her dolls, and wondered what I'd tell her when she was old enough to understand. How would I explain that Mommy and Daddy's marriage ended not just because of Daddy's mistake, but because Mommy chose revenge over forgiveness? The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of lawyers, custody arrangements, and well-meaning friends trying to help me move on. Mark tried to contact me several times, alternating between anger over what I'd done and pleas for reconciliation. I ignored him, focusing instead on rebuilding my life, on being the best mother I could be to Emma. But at night, when the house was quiet and Emma was asleep, doubts crept in. Had I gone too far? Was I any better than Mark, destroying lives out of hurt and anger? I'd tell myself that he deserved it, that actions have consequences. But the justifications rang hollow in the dark of night. Months passed. The divorce was finalized. Mark moved to another state, starting over where his reputation hadn't been tarnished. We communicated only about Emma, our conversations stilted and formal. I threw myself into work, into being a single mom, into trying to forget. But forgetting wasn't easy. Every time I saw a happy couple, every time Emma asked why Daddy didn't live with us anymore, the pain would resurface. The betrayal, the anger, the choices I'd made, they were all part of me now, scars that might fade but would never fully heal. 1 year after that fateful day, I found myself sitting in a therapist's office. It had taken me this long to admit that I needed help, that I couldn't move forward carrying all this baggage alone. As I recounted my story, the betrayal, the revenge, the aftermath, I felt a weight lifting. For the first time, I allowed myself to cry, really cry, for everything I'd lost. The therapist listened without judgment, then asked me a simple question: what do you want your life to look like a year from now? I realized I didn't have an answer. I'd been so focused on the past, on punishing Mark, that I'd lost sight of my own future. Did I want to be defined by this betrayal forever? Did I want Emma to grow up seeing her mother as bitter and angry? That session marked a turning point. Slowly, painfully, I began to let go of the anger. Not for Mark's sake, but for my own. For Emma's. I started to rediscover the woman I'd been before all this happened. The woman who loved her job, who had dreams and ambitions beyond being a wife and mother. I'll never forget what Mark did, or fully forgive him for it. The trust we once shared is gone forever. But I'm learning to forgive myself for not seeing the signs, for letting anger consume me, for the choices I made in the heat of that anger. Today, 2 years after my world fell apart, I can say I'm healing. Emma is thriving, Mark and I have found a way to co-parent civilly, and I'm even considering dating again. The pain isn't gone, but it's no longer all-consuming. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that revenge might feel good in the moment, but it doesn't erase the pain. It doesn't undo the betrayal. In the end, the only way forward is to focus on yourself, on healing, on building a life that doesn't revolve around the person who hurt you. I'm not the same woman I was before this all happened. I'm stronger in some ways, more fragile in others. But I'm here, I'm standing, and I'm ready to write the next chapter of my story, one that isn't defined by betrayal or revenge, but by hope, resilience, and the love I have for my daughter and myself.